This is Tracy Harrell, and I am so excited to be here with Miss Beth Shapiro. Beth, why don't you introduce yourself? So I actually have multiple roles. I run this show that's called Bigger Than Me, right? This success series, and we'll talk a little bit about the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we're doing there. But I'm also now the new diversity and inclusion champion for the Seattle chapter of SCORE. And we've brought you on board because you're the national diversity and inclusion guru. So tell us who you are and tell us about your role. What do you do and how are we going to change the world together, Beth?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Tracy. I really appreciate it. You're making it a lot bigger than I think it is, but that's okay. So I have been with SCORE for 18 years.
Wow.
Almost my whole life. and I've held a variety of roles. I live in Houston. I'm a volunteer, and I've held just about every role at SCORE that you could possibly imagine. I started off, of course, as a mentor. I wasn't very active. I was working part-time when I first started, but I mentored for years, and then they somehow got me to be the membership chair. And I did that and did some recruiting and interviewing and all that. And then they decided that I should be the chapter chair. And so I did that for a while, yeah, and for 2 years. Houston's a very large, as you probably can imagine, because it's a very large city, a very large chapter. And then I moved on. I was asked to be on the advisory board for SCORE National and got to know the powers to be up in headquarters, and then moved on to be the RVP of the Southwest. So
you say RVP, I'm assuming that's the regional vice president.
Right. And so I did that for 2 years.
Of which region? The Pacific Northwest?
No, the Southwest.
Southwest, okay.
Right. So I had Texas and Oklahoma and New Mexico and Wyoming and Colorado and Louisiana, and I forget all in between.
Right.
It was a lot. I loved it because the reason I've stayed with SCORE for so long is because of the people. You know, we're a people organization, and I think that's a lot of the reasons why we do what we do, the volunteers as well as the clients. But while I was doing the RVP role, it became evident to me that we really didn't do anything for women. This is how it started, for women in our organization. Internally, there were very, very few women. I remember the first time I went to the first National Leadership Conference as the chapter chair in Houston. I was so excited to meet all the other women that there were there. And guess what? There weren't any.
Really?
This goes back to 2012. There were, I think, maybe 2 other women, and they had held that role forever and ever. And I was really disappointed. But at the time, you know, I didn't think much of it. But as I got to, you know, have more of a regional role, I said, wait a second. We have very, very few women in this organization, and even fewer women in the leadership roles. And so I thought to myself, we really need to do something. So I formed a women's committee. And that worked out really great. It really did. We kind of fooled around with that for a little while, and then it became really big, and people really were interested. And it became more all-encompassing. It wasn't just about gender anymore. It was about race. It was about ethnicity. It was about age. And I thought to myself, I can't do 2 jobs. I just can't. So I asked the powers to be at the time if I could give up the RVP role and take on the role of VP of Diversity and Inclusion for SCORE nationally. And it's been really, really wonderful since then. So here I am. We have since, you know, expanded to the Hispanic Committee, the Black American Committee, and of course, the real core, because we teach inclusion, is with the ambassadors and the chapter champions. So thank you, Tracy, for doing that for your nation as well. It's great.
I'm excited to do it. So it's a relatively new role, right? So how many chapters?
Yeah.
How many chapters are there in SCORE, and how many chapters actually have champions? Because I want to be able to come back to you, and we'll keep these interviews going, and then we'll be able to talk about the progress. So where are we at right now? We've just started. So where are we at right now?
So for the ambassadors and the chapter champions, the ambassadors came first.
So tell me about the ambassadors. So there are different roles. A champion is at a local level, and ambassador is more at a regional level. Is that how it works?
Correct. It's perfect. Okay. You got it. Absolutely. So what we decided, we had done back 2.5 years ago, we had done inclusion training with all of our leaders. We hired a company called Cook Ross, And they came in and during our regional meetings, they did inclusion training. But after that was over, it was, okay, now what? What do we do? Well, it's really important to keep the conversation going at a chapter level. And what about the average volunteer? They didn't have any inclusion training. It was only the leaders that did. And what did they do with it when they went back? You know, you never know. So, and we have about 250 chapters throughout the US. So that's how the program started, was, all right, we need people that'll go out to the chapters and do the same thing that Cook Ross did, except make it more scoreized. So we redid the Cook Ross training that was pretty generic, and we really made it relevant to SCORE. And that's how the ambassador program started. And the intent was to have 1 to maybe 3 people in each region, which we have now. But then it was, wait a second, there are 250 chapters.
So you dropped off when you were saying something amazing about the next phase of evolution.
Right. And so we had put the ambassadors in place, and we started to do some training at the chapter level. But then the question is, what happens when you leave? You know, you come in, you do the training. At that time, of course, we were, doing face-to-face training. And now what do? And that's where the idea of the chapter champions came up, because they're the people on the ground that keep the conversation going day to day, month to month. And so that's where we are today. The amount of people on all of our committees is upwards of 80. So we've got a lot of people out there that are really, really interested and really doing some fine work out in the field. It's really very encouraging.
Well, thank you for your leadership. You're like a living legend in SCORE history. Clearly, that story is beautiful. I mean, to talk about, you're the first, early on, you taking on this role, you not only watching it evolve, not only seeing a need, but choosing to step in and create a solution for an established and existing need. That's beautiful.
Right.
That's called leaving a legacy. So let me applaud you. No, it's true.
It really is. And you know what? It's been a lot of fun, because you're right. We created it from nothing. And, now we're a large organization and we are making a difference. Our numbers, one of the things we work on all the time is metrics. How do we know if we're successful or not?
That's actually one of my questions. Yes.
Well, we're working on it. So historically, we've always measured the percentage of people that were women and minorities in our chapters. Okay. That's kind of a misleading number. I mean, tell
me why you say that. And I love that you say it, but tell me why you say it.
Okay. So first of all, if you have a chapter of 100 people and you have, 10 women, well, that's 10%. Okay. But if you're in a chapter of 10 and you have 10 women, that's 100%. You know what I mean? So the math doesn't really work. The other thing is it hard to judge a Portland, Maine that has very few Black Americans living there with, Jackson, Mississippi, which has like 80% African Americans? It doesn't make sense, right? So we've always historically measured that way, and we still measure that way. But what we're working on now, one of our committees is working on, is the metrics to make them not just more equitable, because that's a bad word, but more pertinent to the individual chapters and the individual geography.
So is that not happening today? So are you saying, do we not, is there like a standard number that says basically you need to have X% of women and men, and not like an equal percentage of the population? If there's 1% Black people, you can try to meet that. It's not like that today, but that's one of the evolutions. Is that something we can expect to see for 2021? That was one of our questions.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that our advisory council is working on right now, is the metrics. So I said something before that I didn't really mean to say, and that was about the, here's a message. If you ask me, you're going to ask me at the end, what's my message? And here's my message. Don't work on diversity and making your chapter more diverse because national or headquarters wants you to do it. Do it because it's the right thing to do.
Nice.
Right? And a lot of people will say to me, oh, well, I get measured on this. Well, I don't care that you get measured on it. What I care about is, what are your results? Is your chapter diverse? Because if your chapter is diverse, you have people with different ways of thinking about things, with different ways of approaching things. And until you have that, you're not going to be very effective in helping your clients. And that was one of the reasons we started this in the first place, actually, was to try and mirror our clients. 61% of our clients nationally are women, and about
Wow.
23% are African American. And a much smaller percent, about 9% are Hispanic. Well,
Wow.
think about those Hispanic communities. What does that mean?
Wow.
A lot more than 9% of our population in this country is Hispanic. Maybe
Mm.
we're not reaching those underserved communities. So just an evolution of the way we're thinking about things.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. So the other question that we wanted to talk about, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, but the evolution, kind of going, like, what do you believe? What does success look like in 2021 for you? Right? Whether it's some aspect of the metrics, or is there something beyond metrics that you think about when you think about success from an equity, diversity, and inclusion perspective?
You know, yeah, metrics are important, right? If we don't
Mm-hmm.
measure, it doesn't happen. We know that in business, right?
100%.
So we got to have meaningful metrics. That's one thing that we're going to be working on. But I think we can't have a diverse organization without having inclusion. That's why the chapter champions and the ambassadors are so important, because you can recruit all you want. But guess what? If people don't feel comfortable, if they don't feel welcomed, if they don't feel that their opinions are valued, what are they going to do? They're
Leave.
leaving,
Absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
know? So I think you're going to see more of that, more of the chatter about unconscious bias, more of the conversation about that, because that's how we move forward. I can't tell you how many times I've been to a chapter meeting. The first thing that happens when I do an inclusion training is there's some guys, and they're usually men, in the front row. They'll say, "Oh, that doesn't happen here. We're open to everybody." And I'll say, "Really? Does everybody feel that way?" And usually it's a woman, but somebody will raise their hand and say, when I first came here, I didn't feel real good. I stuck it out, but I didn't feel real good. And then as we start to talk about unconscious bias and what it is and how it's not bad, but we have to recognize it, when we start to talk about the fact that words matter, the conversation changes. And then people will say to me, or they'll send me an email a few days later saying, "Thank you so much. I began to see myself in a different way."
Mm.
And so you're going to see more of that.
I love that. And that's really part of the work that we're doing right now. So, what was super exciting as a part of that conversation was to really, the national diversity meeting that we had yesterday. It was so exciting to see all the diversity champions from around the country. Very enthusiastic group, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Very engaged, very much focused on, sharing. I love that part of it. I love the fact that now that everything is virtual, any event or any, opportunity that we have here in Seattle can be available for anyone around the country and vice versa. It's really a beautiful thing. I mean, that really amplifies your opportunity for change. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. We used to have all those calls by phone, but I think you're right. Having a different dimension to it, having seeing each other, being able to share has really helped us, not just with diversity and inclusion, but with our chapter meetings, with
Mm,
our ability to reach clients, with our workshops. We can now reach across districts or across the United States to deliver events for our clients. So as much as we complain about sitting in front of a computer every day, I'm the first one to complain. It really does have some benefits,
right.
in the sharing. Did you notice too, Tracy, how diverse that committee is?
I absolutely did. I was gonna share that with you. I mean, and I definitely felt welcome. And I
Oh,
think when you
good.
talk about, you use
Good.
the word, you use the word inclusion, measuring inclusion. And there's a couple of ways that I think you can measure inclusion as well, right? We haven't really done that. We measure
Mhm.
diversity, but we don't measure inclusion. And that's one of the things that I'm actually going to be bringing into our chapter for 2021. Would love to be a part of the mission, with the national team as well, to really think about, like, here's how we can do some of those things. And let me ask you two questions. We only have 6 minutes left, so I'm going to put you on
Okay.
the spot. Is that okay?
Okay. Go
Can I
ahead.
put you on the spot? Can I just
Sure.
throw you?
Do it. Do
You've,
it.
you've already said everything that I love, and I love you. And can we commit to doing some follow-up interviews, by the way? And then we kind of, like,
Absolutely.
maybe over the next
Absolutely.
each 30 days, we at least get 30 minutes in, and I can bring it to my chapter meetings, and it'll just allow us to kind of
Absolutely.
keep, because you're just fascinating. So my one question for you, you mentioned unconscious bias. And some people actually still say that there is no bias, no racial bias in this country, even after watching George Floyd get murdered on national television. And so the initiative that I'm leading is called Achieving Racial Equity and Inclusion in Business, Education, Wealth, and Health. I have a focus on the business side because I've had 25 years in corporate America. But my question to you is, what do you say to people that don't believe there's a problem to even solve, that don't believe that this work needs to happen? What would you say to those individuals about why it's important that we unite lovingly to change and to work to achieve racial equity and inclusion in business?
It's just like it's about racial equity, yes. It's about gender equity, yes. It's about age equity. It's about all of it. And, I personally, and I think, well, I know all of us on our committees and many of us, if not most of us in our chapters, understand equity is important, and we talk about that in business, pay equity, for example. We talk about that all the time. It's really hard to change people's minds about a lot of things, right? All you can do, I believe, is educate them and have discussions and open conversations, and that's for SCORE. I know when I leave a chapter meeting, start talking about things that may be a little uncomfortable, like race relations, right? That's a good thing. Because until you talk about it, until you get your feelings out, until you hear the other side, whatever that other side might be, change can't happen. And I hope that our SCORE chapters really feel that when they're talking to their colleagues, when they're in chapter meetings, that it's a safe place. And that is really my hope. And once we open stations up, then anything can happen.
So I'm going to maybe make you feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because you said we're supposed to get a little uncomfortable. How did you feel when you saw George Floyd get murdered on national television? Like, what did that make you feel or think?
I can't answer that, Tracy. I can't, because I can't give you my personal opinions. I can't. Whatever I say, I mean, I can tell you offline what my personal
Oh, okay,
opinions
okay,
are,
okay, okay,
but I
okay.
can't do it here. One of the things that we have to be careful of at SCORE is that we are funded by the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, we have to be careful. We have to be careful what we say, not what we do. We need to do the right things. Like I said, we need to do the right things. But I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Well, that's a great question. So now you're educating me a little bit. So when we talk about, having conversations where people are willing to talk about race or gender, et cetera. Right now, I'm actually leading an initiative that's about racial equity and inclusion.
Right.
It's not my only focus, but it's one of my focus areas. Are you saying that people should not share what they feel about
No,
a situation?
no.
Tell me
They
what
can
the
share what they
guidelines
feel
are.
about the situation, but we can't get into political conversations.
Oh, for sure, 100%. 100%. So really the conversation around how does someone feel about a thing, which actually, because to me, the only way to change a system is to change the individuals that are a part of the system. And to your point, having conversations, loving, open conversations where every opinion matters. Do you agree with that? That that's the way to change, is to
Absolutely.
really open up and have
Absolutely.
dialogues? Okay, well, good. So that's our plan as we move forward. And I know
Yep.
we've got 1 minute out. Is there anything else you
Okay.
want to share with the chapter
No,
around diversity and inclusion?
I just want to compliment the Seattle chapter. You guys have been on the forefront. You guys, and I say guys, and people tell me, don't say guys. It's,
I'm
it's a
from the
man thing to
South.
say.
I
All
say
right, I won't do
guys,
it
it's
anymore.
okay.
But I really want to compliment you. I want to compliment you, the whole chapter, Tracy, you, Jody, on really taking a step into this thing that can be very muddy, right? That can be a little uncomfortable, but because I know that that it's important. And I'm hoping that you'll be one of the leading chapters in diversity and inclusion. I'll be there by your side. How's that?
Thank you so much. Beth Shapiro, it is such a pleasure to connect with you today. And I look forward to having future conversations
You
with you
bet.
as we change the status quo.
You
Thank you,
bet.
ma'am.
Thank you,
Have a
Tracy.
beautiful
Okay, bye,
day.
everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.